Lord Conrad Ravenswood received the first letter from Miss Elspeth Kincaid on a Tuesday morning in November. He placed it to one side of his breakfast plate and finished his eggs first. The envelope was plain, the handwriting precise and unadorned. No estate address marked the seal. The sender gave her name as Miss E. Kincaid of Harwick Crossing, a mining village in Northumberland that Ravenswood knew only by its output figures. She had written, she said, regarding the new eastern shaft his company was sinking at the Dunross colliery. Lord Conrad Ravenswood, Earl of Dunross, had spent 2 years developing that shaft. He had hired the best geological consultants money could persuade. He had pushed through permits, soothed anxious shareholders, and convinced a skeptical board of directors that the eastern seam, if reached carefully, would double the colliery's annual yield. At 36, he considered it the most demanding work of his life, and he was not accustomed to finding work difficult. Miss Kincaid considered it likely to flood. He read 3 paragraphs, she described. With measurements he had no immediate way to dispute, a network of limestone karst beneath the eastern heading, dissolved rock, subterranean water pockets, the kind of geological detail that took trained surveyors months to assemble. She suggested the spring snowmelt, combined with the pressure of excavation along the north wall, would push groundwater into the lower drift faster than any pump his engineers had specified could manage. She included a diagram, several in fact. Lord Ravenswood looked at the signature again, Miss E. Kincaid. He folded the letter closed. "Another complaint?" asked Mr. Whitlock, his estate manager, from across the breakfast table. "A woman from Harwick Crossing believes she understands karst hydrology." Mr. Whitlock did not laugh, which was one of the qualities that made him useful. "What does she recommend?" "Closing the north face of the eastern heading until spring samples are taken. A delay of perhaps 4 to 6 weeks. That is expensive, unnecessary, and based on measurements I cannot verify." Lord Ravenswood set the letter beside his teacup. "Ask March to reply. Thank her for her concern, inform her that our geological survey was completed by accredited professionals, and assure her that the colliery has operated safely for 30 years. Mr. Whitlock wrote the instruction. He hesitated. "Shall I forward the diagrams to Mr. Sorrel?" Lord Ravenswood looked at them again. They were detailed, irritatingly detailed. "No, Sorrel is managing 3 shifts and a ventilation report. I won't distract him with every anxious correspondent who learned the word geological." The reply reached Harwick Crossing 4 days later. "Now, my friends, pull your chair a little closer. I want you to understand something about Miss Elspeth Kincaid before we go any further. Because the story I am about to tell you is not really about a coal mine. It is about what happens when the world teaches a person to make themselves small, and that person refuses." Elspeth Kincaid was 28 years old. She lived in 2 rooms above her uncle's surveying office, in a house that smelled of map ink and damp wool. Her uncle, Mr. Fergus Kincaid, surveyed land parcels for the county. He was a good surveyor, methodical and honest. He had also, 30 years ago, recognized something in his niece that most people around him could not name, and therefore did not value. Her father had been a schoolmaster in Berwick. He had taught her Euclid before she was 12. By 15, she was correcting his trigonometry. By 18, when he died, and she came to live with her uncle, she was reading geology journals that most men with university degrees had never opened. She had no university degree. She would not have been permitted to sit the examinations. She had applied, at 23, to 3 geological survey firms. 2 did not reply. One replied to say they were not presently in a position to consider female applicants, and they wished her every success in domestic pursuits. She went home and wrote a technical paper on limestone karst formation in the Northumberland basin. She submitted it to the Geological Review under the name E. Kincaid. They published it. They published 3 more after that. No one asked what the E stood for. She read Lord Ravenswood's courteous, elegant, thoroughly useless reply. standing at her uncle's window, looking at the drift mouth of the Dunross colliery on the hill 2 miles away. Then she took out fresh paper. "My lord," she wrote, "your geologists surveyed the eastern heading in August during the driest season in 12 years. I have been measuring the underground stream that feeds from the plateau above Harwich Crossing since I was 19. I have 9 years of records. In 6 of those 9 years, the spring melt elevated water pressure in the lower limestone by a factor of 3 within a 6-week period. The excavation of the north wall has removed the primary rock barrier between that stream and your eastern heading. I am not asking you to abandon the shaft. I am asking you to take a winter core sample at the north face before you proceed. If I am wrong, the delay costs you 1 week. If I am right, the cost of ignoring this will be paid by the men working underground. E. Kincaid." She enclosed a second set of diagrams. These showed the stream's seasonal movement, overlaid on a copy of the colliery's published excavation plan. She had drawn the overlay from memory. The alignment was precise to within 4 feet. Lord Ravenswood received the second letter during a meeting with his mine captain, Mr. Brent, and his chief engineer, Mr. Sorrell. He recognized the handwriting on the envelope immediately. Mr. Sorrell noticed, "Your correspondent from Harwich Crossing has returned, I see." "She has." Lord Ravenswood broke the seal and read, while Mr. Brent continued his report on the week's tonnage. The calculations were coherent. More than coherent. They traced 9 years of water level measurements to a set of conclusions that Sorrell's summer survey had simply not considered, because no one conducting a summer survey had reason to look for spring melt behavior. Lord Ravenswood carried the letter to the map table when the meeting ended. "Sorrell," he said, "has a winter core sample been taken at the north face of the eastern heading?" Sorrell's expression tightened. "A summer survey was completed." "I know. Has a winter sample been taken?" "It was not part of the approved assessment plan." "Approve it now." Sorrell was 53, experienced, and possessed of the particular pride that comes from being trusted for a long time without being questioned. He looked at the letter in Lord Ravenswood's hand. "May I ask whose recommendation prompted this?" "A geological analyst. From Whitmore's firm. Independent." Sorrell read the signature. His face said everything it did not say aloud. He placed the letter on the table with the careful movements of a man who was choosing not to throw it, "My lord. Every major project generates objections. Farmers, villagers, journalists. If we delay operations on the recommendation of every..." She has not objected to the operation. She has identified a specific geological feature and asked for 1 core sample. Based on 9 years of field measurements. Lord Ravenswood met his engineer's eyes. "If she is wrong, the sample proves it and we proceed. If she is right, we are grateful someone noticed. Order the sample." Mr. Sorrell left without further argument. He did not, however, order the sample immediately. "Here is where I must pause, dear friends, and ask you something. Have you ever sent a warning into the world, a quiet, carefully worded, evidence-filled warning, and watched it disappear into silence? Not denied, not argued with, simply set aside, by people who found it more convenient to continue than to stop and listen. If you know that feeling, you already understand what kept Elspeth Kincaid writing when most people would have stopped. If this is the kind of story that keeps you company on an evening, and I suspect it is, or you wouldn't still be here, then please consider joining us at Moonlight at Bellwood. Stories like this one take time to find and time to tell properly. Your support makes that possible now. Back to Harwich Crossing. 3 weeks passed. Mr. Sorrell did not take the core sample. He filed a report noting that the approved assessment had been completed and that operational delays during the productive winter season were inadvisable. Then the January thaw came 2 weeks early. The underground temperature in the eastern heading dropped 6 degrees in 48 hours. A sign, if anyone had been measuring it, that groundwater was moving faster than expected through the rock above the north face. Miss Kincaid had been measuring it. She had been measuring the stream above the plateau every 3 days since October. She wrote a third letter. This one she addressed not to Lord Ravenswood's London estate but to the colliery office directly, marked urgent, and asked the mine captain to place it in his lordship's hands personally. Lord Ravenswood was not at his London estate. He was, in fact, in Harwick Crossing. He had arrived the previous evening. Not because he had read Miss Kincaid's third letter. He hadn't, but because the quarterly numbers had drawn him north, and he had discovered, on arrival, that the winter core sample had never been ordered. He found this out from Mr. Brent, the mine captain, who delivered information with the expression of a man who had been waiting for someone with the authority to hear it. Lord Ravenswood was standing at the eastern heading's surface entrance, looking at the chalk markers his foreman had placed along the North Drift's line, when he saw a woman descend the bank of the culvert that ran along the plateau's southern edge. She was carrying a measuring rod and a field notebook. Her boots were caked with grey mud. She moved along the bank with the economy of someone who had made this walk many times and was not interested in its aesthetics. A boy of about 14 followed her, writing on a slate. Lord Ravenswood walked toward the culvert. Miss Kincaid, he said, because he knew by then that there was only one woman in Harwick Crossing who would be measuring a culvert in January. She looked up. Her expression was not the deference he was accustomed to receiving, nor the alarm his title sometimes caused in people who had not expected him. It was something closer to exasperation. "You weren't expected until Thursday," she said. "I came early. What are you measuring?" "Flow rate." The temperature dropped 6 degrees at the base of the north face in the last 48 hours. That means the underground channel above the eastern heading is moving. She handed the rod to the boy. "Right 14 inches, Jamie." She looked back at Lord Ravenswood. "You should close the North Drift today, not tomorrow." He stared at her for a moment. "Walk with me." They walked to her uncle's office, which was not the introduction to her working space that Elspeth had imagined in the various versions of this conversation she had rehearsed in her head. But she led him up the narrow stair without apology and opened the door. Lord Ravenswood stepped inside and stopped. The room was smaller than the entry hall of his London house. It contained a narrow desk, 2 wooden chairs, a camp cot pushed against one wall and, covering nearly every horizontal surface, geological models, water flow diagrams, core samples sorted in labelled rows, and notebooks stacked 6 deep at the edges of the map table. In the centre of the map table sat a model of the Dunross Colliery eastern heading, built from plaster and wire. Coloured thread marked the underground water channels. Small wooden blocks represented the rock strata. A thin rubber tube, connected to a hand-operated bulb, represented the underground stream. She had built his mine in miniature, in her spare room. "Pump it," she said. He looked at her. "The bulb. Squeeze it 3 times. That simulates the increase in flow I measured this morning." Lord Ravenswood squeezed the bulb. Water moved through the rubber tube. It reached the plaster block marked north face. Coloured water. She had used ink, seeped through a hairline crack in the plaster and pooled at the base of the model's eastern heading. "The men are down there now," she said quietly. Lord Ravenswood stood very still. Then he said, "How long have you been collecting data on this stream?" 9 years. "When did you first identify the karst feature?" 4 years ago, when the colliery announced the new shaft. He examined the notebooks stacked beside the model. He picked up the one on top. The data inside was organized by date, cross-referenced by temperature, rainfall, and barometric pressure. The handwriting was the same handwriting from the letters, the same handwriting from a series of papers he had read, and in one case, publicly disputed, in the Geological Review. He turned to the page she had bookmarked. The notation in the margin read, "Suff E. Kincaid, Karst Hydrology of the Northern Limestone Basin, Geol, Reven, Volume 14, and beneath it a correction to one of the cited measurements made in pencil in the same precise hand. Lord Ravenswood turned to face her. "You wrote the karst paper," he said. "Yes. And the one on underground stream pressure in coal measures?" "Yes. And the response to Hargreaves's drainage model that the review published last spring?" "Yes." He had cited that response in a letter to his own engineers. He had called the analysis admirably thorough. He had said to Mr. Sorrell that whoever E. Kincaid was, they had a better grasp of subsurface hydrology than half the consultants on the market. "You knew who I was," he said, "from my first reply. Your signature was on it. And you didn't mention that we had corresponded in print." Elspeth looked at him steadily. "Your secretary's reply thanked me for my concern and assured me that qualified professionals had already considered the matter. I doubted that informing you we had argued in the journals would improve your attention to the measurements." Lord Ravenswood felt heat move up the back of his neck. He thought of every letter he had written to the review, signed with his full name and title. He thought of the anonymous E. Kincaid, whose conclusions he had challenged, whose methodology he had called into question in a footnote that had been reprinted in 2 subsequent issues. The person he had been publicly debating for 3 years was standing in front of him in a mud-stained surveyor's coat, telling him his men were in danger. "Close the north drift today," she said again, "not tomorrow." He went back down the stairs and ordered it closed within the hour. He was too late by 40 minutes. The underground stream did not flood the eastern heading. It did not need to. The pressure behind the north face shifted first, a slow, grinding movement of waterlogged limestone that no pump could have addressed and no summer survey had anticipated. The tunnel wall at the base of the north drift bulged, then it cracked. Water did not pour in. It seeped steadily from a dozen hairline fractures simultaneously, and the ground beneath the lower staging gave way. 7 men were in the eastern heading when it happened. 4 made it out on their own. 3 did not. Elspeth heard the signal blast from her uncle's window. She was already moving before the second blast sounded. By the time Lord Ravenswood reached the pit head, she was there ahead of him with her notebook open, showing Mr. Brent the exact point on the surface where a relief shaft could be sunk to intersect the pocket where the 3 men had most likely taken refuge. She had calculated it from the model. She had calculated it 3 months ago. In the margin of a page she had hoped no one would ever need. 12 feet west of the current vent shaft, she said. 14 feet down. The rock there is sandstone. They can cut through it in 6 hours if they start now. How can you possibly know? Mr. Brent began. Because I built the model, she said. Start now. Lord Ravenswood looked at the notebook, at the diagram, at the measurement that matched the colliery's own survey coordinates exactly. Then he looked at Mr. Brent. Start now, he said. They found all 3 men alive, 6 hours and 22 minutes later, in a sandstone pocket precisely where the notebook said they would be. Now, my dear friends, I wish I could tell you that was the end of the difficulty. That Lord Ravenswood stood at the pit head and announced to the world that a woman from Harwick Crossing had done what his chief engineer had not, and that justice followed as neatly as a calculation proved. But you already know the world is not built so neatly, and you know, I think, what came next. Mr. Sorrell submitted a report to the County Mining Inspectorate. In it, he described the geological anomaly in the eastern heading and the emergency relief shaft operation. He described, in considerable technical detail, the subsurface water analysis that had guided the rescue. He did not mention Elspeth Kincaid. He used the phrase "my ongoing assessment of the northern limestone basin" to describe 9 years of data he had never seen until Lord Ravenswood placed it in front of him. The report was printed in the Inspectorate's quarterly bulletin. The Mining Society of Northern England wrote to Mr. Sorrell requesting a presentation on his methodology. Elspeth read the bulletin at her uncle's desk on a Thursday afternoon. She read it twice, very carefully, the way a person reads something they want to be certain they have understood correctly before deciding what to do about it. Then she wrote to Lord Ravenswood. His reply came not through his secretary. It came in his own handwriting, 3 days later, on paper that still carried the faint smell of the colliery ledger room where he had been working when he read her letter. Miss Kincaid. I have seen Sorrel's report. I want you to know that I had not seen it before this morning, and that his characterization of the analysis as his own is not something I will permit to stand. Tell me how you wish to proceed and I will support it. C. Ravenswood. She read the letter. Then she read it again. My lord, she wrote back. I wish to present the original notebooks and data to the inspectorate directly under my name with the dates recorded. I wish the rescue report amended, and I wish Mr. Sorrel to be asked publicly to explain the source of the methodology he claims as his own. If you are willing to confirm the timeline of events in writing, that is sufficient. I do not require you to fight my argument, only to confirm the facts. His reply came by return post. I will do more than confirm them, but I understand why you would rather I did not. He did in the end do more than confirm them. At the inspectorate's public review of the Eastern Heading collapse, Lord Ravenswood spoke first, before any of his engineers or solicitors, and said the following, which I will tell you exactly, because it matters too much to paraphrase. He said, I received 3 letters from Miss Elspeth Kincaid before the collapse. I dismissed the first. I acted too slowly on the second. The third arrived the same morning. I was finally standing at the pithead myself. The analysis that saved 3 lives was hers. It was hers from the first letter, and it remains hers now. Any report that suggests otherwise is in error. Mr. Sorrel challenged the claim. He suggested the notebooks could have been prepared after the fact. He suggested Miss Kincaid had access to survey materials through the Countessity office and might have reconstructed the analysis from existing reports. Elspeth produced the notebooks. 9 years of dated entries, some of the earliest pages foxed with age and water damage. She produced the original diagram she had enclosed with her first letter, the very copy Lord Ravenswood's secretary had received, still carrying the postmark. She produced the letter from the Geological Review, acknowledging receipt of her karst paper 4 years earlier, addressed to E. Kincaid, Harwick Crossing. She produced, last, the copy of Lord Ravenswood's own letter to his engineers, the one in which he had called E. Kincaid's analysis admirably thorough. She placed it in front of Mr. Sorrel on the hearing table. That letter, she said, was written 14 months before the collapse. You may ask Lord Ravenswood when he wrote it. You may also ask what he understood E. Kincaid's qualifications to be at the time. Lord Ravenswood, from his seat at the hearing table, said quietly, I assumed at the time that E. Kincaid was a man. The room was very still. That assumption, he said, is the most important fact in this entire proceeding. Mr. Sorrel's presentation to the Mining Society was cancelled. His report to the inspectorate was formally amended. The rescue operation was recorded in the County Mining Register under the following entry: Emergency Relief Shaft Location and Methodology, E. Kincaid, Geological Analyst, Harwick Crossing. It was the first time her full name appeared beside the word analyst in an official record. Her uncle framed the page from the register and hung it in the surveying office. Elspeth pretended she hadn't noticed it there for 2 weeks before she admitted she had. The Dunross Colliery's eastern heading was redesigned over the following spring, incorporating a drainage channel that Miss Kincaid had specified in her original correspondence. Construction took 6 weeks longer than planned. The eastern seam, when finally reached, yielded 30% more than the initial projections. The investors were satisfied. They generally become satisfied, I have found, once survival reveals itself to be profitable. Lord Ravenswood remained in Harwick Crossing longer than anyone had expected. He said it was to oversee the redesign. Mr. Whitlock, who had worked for him for 11 years, said nothing about this aloud, but he noticed that his lordship made a particular point of being present at the colliery on the 3 mornings each week when Miss Kincaid came to take her measurements. One evening in April, when the plateau stream was running clear and the air had finally begun to hold a little warmth, Lord Ravenswood found her at her map table after the workday had ended, correcting a drainage calculation by lamplight and the unmistakable air of a woman. There were tea things on the corner of the desk which she hadn't noticed because she had found a discrepancy in the soil permeability figures, and it mattered considerably more than the temperature of the tea. He sat in the second chair and waited until she had found the discrepancy. She corrected it in pencil, looked up, and found him watching her with an expression she had not seen on him before. "You should publish the drainage analysis," he said. "I intend to." "Under your full name?" "Yes. The Geological Review will accept it. You know that." "I know." She set down the pencil. "Are you about to offer to use your influence with the editors?" "I was." "Don't." He looked at her. She met his look without apology. "I want the work published because the work merits it," she said. "Not because the Earl of Dunross made a recommendation. The moment you do that, the recommendation becomes the thing people remember, not the analysis. Then, what would help? There are 4 other women in this county doing exactly this kind of field work," she said. "Measurement, observation, analysis, sending their results to journals under initials or through male relatives. They are not published because their names are not considered credible. Give them access to the colliery surveys, the county land records, the data that your tenants' lease agreements entitle you to. Make it available for independent analysis to anyone with the methodology to use it." Lord Ravenswood was still. "That would cost you nothing," she said, "and it would matter for a very long time. You have thought about this for years." "I have thought about very little else." He nodded, the way a man nods when he is setting down something he has been carrying without knowing it. The habit of solving problems alone, of believing that authority and understanding were the same thing. "I will write the access policy this week," he said. "Will you review it?" "Yes. And if I get it wrong, I'll tell you." "You always do," he almost smiled. "Is that a permanent arrangement?" Elspeth picked up her pencil again, but did not immediately look back at the calculation. "That depends on what you mean by it." "I mean," he said, with the deliberateness of a man who has thought carefully about a sentence before speaking it, "that I would like to continue arguing with you. Indefinitely. Across tables rather than through letters, with the understanding that you will correct me when I am wrong, and that I will do the same for you, and that neither of us will consider that an insult. You have been wrong more often than I have. I know that. And you dismissed 3 letters before reading them properly. I know that too. And you assumed." "Elspeth," he said her name for the first time quietly, like a full stop. "I know everything I did wrong. I am asking what you want to do next." She looked at the map on the table between them. The plateau stream, the eastern heading, the relief shaft marked in red ink, 6 hours and 22 minutes that had not been in anyone's plans. Then she looked at him. "Ask me again in a month," she said, "when I've finished the drainage paper." He did, and when he did, she said yes, but only after handing him a set of written terms so thorough that his solicitors read them twice to make sure they hadn't missed anything. They hadn't. Lord Ravenswood's estate in the North Country carried from that year forward a geological survey office, registered under the name Kincaid Associates. It employed 4 analysts. 3 of them were women who had been publishing under initials for the better part of a decade. The 4th was a 19-year-old apprentice from Harwick Crossing who had grown up watching Elspeth measure stream depths and had decided, somewhere around the age of 11, that this was a perfectly reasonable way to spend a life. The Mining Society of Northern England admitted its first female associate member the following spring. The vote was not unanimous. The minutes record, however, that the argument against admission consisted primarily of the claim that no precedent existed. The argument for admission consisted of the Dunross rescue record, the drainage analysis, the karst paper, and 3 subsequent publications, all signed Elspeth Kincaid, that had been cited in the Society's own safety guidelines without any member having noticed who wrote them. The eastern heading at Dunross Colliery still operates. On the wall beside the entrance, at eye level, there is a plaque. It reads, Drainage and Safety Analysis. Elspeth Kincaid, Geological Analyst. The lettering is the same size as every other name on the wall. She asked for that specifically, not larger, the same. She said it was because the work should speak at the same volume as everyone else's. Lord Ravenswood said it was because she had never needed extra space to make herself heard. She corrected him on that point, as she corrected him on most points, carefully, with evidence, and at a time of her choosing. He was wrong less often as the years went on. He will tell you so himself, she kept a record. My friends, one more thing before you go. Lord Ravenswood kept the first letter. He kept it in his desk, not as a monument to his own mistake, but as a useful reminder of the distance between believing yourself well-informed and actually being so. He showed it sometimes to young engineers who were new to the colliery and inclined toward the particular confidence that comes with a fresh qualification. He would hand them the letter and say, "This arrived before the collapse. I did not read it carefully enough. Tell me what it says." They always could. It was a very clear letter. The truth in it had not changed because a woman wrote it. It had not become useful because a lord eventually listened to it. It was true when it arrived on a Tuesday morning in November, sitting beside a breakfast plate, waiting to be read. The only thing that changed was the man who finally understood that ignoring a warning does not make the thing warned about go away. It only determines who is responsible when it arrives. If you want more stories like this one, stories of people who kept writing when the world had decided not to read, then stay with us here at Moonlight at Bellwood. Subscribe if you haven't already. Leave us a word in the comments if this one stayed with you. I will be here beside the fire with another story that the world nearly forgot to keep.